Lifted.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the Casey Hutchison amendment, which was added to the bill before us last week. I didn't speak before the amendment passed, but I think it is important to highlight this, and particularly in light of things that have happened just in the last week in Afghanistan. The bill that was passed is a bill that would focus on the women and girls in Afghanistan and the plight that they have. Sadly, Mr. President, the day before, Senator Casey and I introduced our amendment with many wonderful co-sponsors from the Senate to help address the plight of women and girls. A tragedy appeared in the newspaper. A 14-year-old girl from a village in Afghanistan was beheaded by two men. The justification for beheading this child, who was going to fetch water, was that she, with the support of her family, had declined to marry one of the men. Gazatina was a student, a brave act for a girl in itself in Afghanistan, and she was butchered while fetching water because she would, at the age of 14, not marry one of the men. In October, another young woman's throat was slashed because she refused to work as a prostitute. And honestly, Mr. President, some of the women who are forced into prostitution then are killed because of what they do. In September, 3 young women, 2 of them sisters, were attacked by 6 men because they were television actors, and these 6 fundamentalists believed their dress was immodest. The sisters barely survived, but their friend bled to death outside a mosque from horrific staff wounds. Mr. President, this is life in a situation that has improved for women since the fall of the Taliban rule. Clearly, there are still entrenched cultural and societal ills that will take much more work to cure. Despite the strides that have been made, Afghanistan has still been ranked the most dangerous country for women in the world. Afghanistan falls behind the Democratic Republic of Congo, Pakistan, and Somalia. Women and girls are constantly under attack, particularly if they try to go to school in some areas where there are still police that don't believe girls should be able to, or if they teach others, there is a price to pay, and if they want to participate or speak out, there is another price to pay. Women are frequently incarcerated for moral crimes, like leaving home. It is estimated that half of the country's imprisoned women and girls are incarcerated for such offenses. The life of many women in Afghanistan is, of course, incomprehensible to us. Here are a few statistics. An estimated 70 to 80% of marriages are forced. 87% of women face at least one form of physical, sexual, or psychological violence or forced marriages in their lifetimes. Women in Afghanistan have a 1 in 11 chance of dying in childbirth, and roughly 87% of women are illiterate. Mr. President, the Afghan Women and Girls Security Support Act, which Senator Casey and I co-sponsored along with many others in this body, will help improve the lives of these women and make Afghanistan a safer place, where our goal and their goal would be that they could freely participate in public life, get an education, raise their families without fear of retaliation for fully realizing their potential, and for making their own life choices. Here's what the bill does. It requires the Department of Defense to produce a three-part strategy to support the security of Afghan women and girls during and after the transition process. It is monitoring and responding to changes in women's security during and after the transition. If it appears that there is a deterioration in women's security, the bill would require the DoD and our partners who will remain there to take concrete action to support the women in these situations. It also will improve their opportunities and treatment by the Afghan National Security Forces personnel, and it would increase the recruitment and retention of women in the Afghan National Security Forces. Mr. President, last week I read in the Washington Post about a 17-year-old Afghan girl who had dreamed of becoming a doctor. If she had been in America, we would have been speaking of her now as an example of success. Instead, I am speaking of a child so desperate to escape an arranged marriage that she had been promised to since she was 9 years old, that she jumped off the roof of her house. Killing herself was the only outlet that she could see. She survived this suicide attempt, though she is now paralyzed. And while her story is tragic in every way, there is a glimmer of hope here because, in fact, her family has backed her now petition to annul her engagement. Her family has stood with her after she took such a bold step. Even that would never have happened under Taliban rule. So we know that change will be slow, but if it is encouraged and if progress is protected, it can come. Mr. President, I want to say that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, when she was a senator, along with myself, were the honorary co-chairs of Vital Voices, which is an organization that looked for the women of the third world countries that are so mistreated and looked for things to celebrate in those countries. And we have honored the women who have stood up in those countries and achieved great success, either in economics or in humane treatment for women in those countries. And Mr. President, I think we have begun to raise the awareness in many areas. Our former First Lady Laura Bush also, reading of this amendment that was adopted last week, reached out to say what a great thing we are doing. And I know Secretary of State Clinton also will be supportive of keeping this amendment in conference. So I am very pleased that we have been able to have the agreement of the managers who are here on the floor to unanimously accept the Casey Hutchison amendment. And I am going to implore them or twist their arms to assure that this amendment stays in conference so that there will be a clear support and that the women and girls of Afghanistan will know that they don't have to do such drastic things as try to kill themselves or be in such harm's way that a rejected suitor would actually murder his 14-year-old intended because she said that she would not marry him. Mr. President, this is a human rights issue, if there ever was one, and I'm very proud to co-sponsor the bill with Senator Casey, Senator Mikulski, Senator Gillibrand, and others and Senator Franken I know is a co-sponsor, and I would just say that we must keep this as one of the things that we wish to achieve for the Afghan people. As we exit militarily, we must keep the transition force to assure that all of the lives of our great military that have been lost in Afghanistan will not be in vain. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President. Senator from Michigan.